A warm welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and across the world. You're watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the hour. Reactions trail U.S. President Donald Trump's decision to cut aid to Ukraine. We'll be looking at the extent of its impact. Meanwhile, the U.S. president is preparing to address Congress today. The address is expected to lay out efforts to slash the size of the federal government. Plus, today is World Obesity Day. What are experts saying about how much of a problem this could be in the near future? The World Today starts now. U.S. President Donald Trump may have cut aid to Ukraine, but the country's Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal says both countries are determined to continue cooperating. He says Kyiv is ready to sign a deal that would give the U.S. access to Ukraine's deposits of rare earth minerals. Trump and Zelensky are yet to comment on the aid cuts. He is preparing for his address to Congress later today, but very silent he has been on Ukraine. As for the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, still no mention of Trump's decision, but he has shared details of his call with Germany's incoming Chancellor Friedrich Merz. In Moscow, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says a pause is likely to be the best contribution to peace. There's also been no word from President Vladimir Putin. In the meantime, Russian drone attacks continue in Ukraine. The country's Air Force reported that 99 drones were launched into the country by Russia overnight. Ukrainian soldiers involved in the fighting against Russia have been sharing their response to the U.S. pause in military aid, many unsure how long they can hold out without U.S. support. One soldier speaking to the BBC says the real cost of the U.S. cutting off aid will be measured in lives, in more orphans and in more suffering. Another soldier says resources of the Ukrainian armed forces are limitless, so if needed, they keep hitting them as long as necessary. Now, before the announcement by the U.S. On cutting off aid to Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky was asked at a press conference what he would do if the U.S. cut off aid. He said it would not be beneficial to anyone. In his words, "We're working with the United States of America. I think it is not beneficial for anyone to stop this aid. We certainly understand that the aid we're receiving now is the aid that was once passed by the United States Congress." Ongoing shipments were authorized under the Biden administration on Sunday, though, following talks with the European leaders. UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer announced more funding for Ukraine and a coalition of the willing in terms of troops and air cover to guarantee a potential peace deal, although he did not confirm which countries would join him. On Monday, however, Zelensky was quoted as saying the end of the conflict was very, very far away. That resulted in a response from Trump on social media saying Zelensky does not want there to be peace as long as he has America's backing, and the U.S. will not will not put up with it for much longer. Well, Trump did say that the Ukrainian president should be more appreciative of his country's support. It followed Friday's huge row between the two at the Oval Office. It came just hours ahead of reports about the U.S. pausing all military aid to Ukraine. Commenting on whether the minerals deal with Zelensky failed to sign after the bust-up, Trump replied, "I'll let you know. We're making a speech. You probably heard about it tomorrow night, so I'll let you know tomorrow night, but no, I don't think so." Russia has been discussing its potential for rare earths with both Vladimir Putin and with Donald Trump, suggesting the deals could be done.
Well, I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border. This country really was like the fence on the border. It was very important to Europe, and I'm not knocking Europe. I'm saying that they were a lot smarter than Joe Biden, because Joe Biden didn't have a clue. He just gave money hand over fist, and they should have been able to equalize with us. In other words, if we gave $1, they should have given. Well, we gave $350 billion. They probably gave 100, but on top of it all, they get their money back because they're doing it in the form of a loan, and it's a secured loan. So when I saw that, which I've known about for a little while, I said it's time for us to be smart. At the same time, it's great for them because they get us in the country taking the rare earth, which is going to fuel this big engine, and especially the engine that we've in a very short time created. And we get something, and we're there. We have a presence there. With all of that being said, I want one thing to happen. I want all of those young people to stop being killed. They're being killed by the thousands every single week. Last week, 2,700 were killed. 2,700 young, in this case, just about all young boys from Ukraine and from Russia. And that's not young people from the United States, but it's on a human basis. I want to see it stop. The money is one thing, but the death. And they're losing thousands of soldiers a week. And that's not including the people that get killed every time a town goes down or a missile goes into a town. And I want to see it stop.
U.S. President Donald Trump, he also claims he is making deals with everyone, including Russia, but asked if he plans to lift sanctions on Russia in the event of a Ukraine peace agreement. The U.S. president said he is working with everyone. And the U.S. and Russia have been holding rounds of talks in recent weeks on bilateral relations, while both have also spoken on close future economic cooperation.
Well, we're going to make deals with everybody to get this war, including Europe and European nations. And they've acted very well. You know, they're good people. I know most of them are friends of mine. The heads of state, the heads of the various countries, prime ministers from the different. I got four prime ministers and 5 presidents called me over the last 2 days, and they want to work it out. They want to get it worked out. And I think they're also, you know, they're talking money, but the money is less important than the deaths. We're talking thousands of young people a week. And people would say, why do I care about Ukraine, young people? Why do I care about, and not all young, but they're pretty young. You know, Ukraine is running a little bit low, and they're getting older. They're recruiting older people. It's a very, very sad thing that's happening over there. And we want to get it finished. We want to stop the death.
We'll be revisiting Ukraine and the U.S. cutting aid to the country. But in another development, U.S. President Donald Trump will be making a joint address to Congress tonight, an address that is expected to lay out his efforts to rapidly slash the size of the federal government in ways critics warn overstep his authority and threaten lasting image. The speech comes as Trump is making a sharp break from the previous administration, both on the international and domestic fronts. On Friday, Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance had a heated confrontation, as we remember, with the Ukrainian president in the Oval Office, rocking international relations and prompting concerns from critics that the White House is moving away from a democratic ally and hewing closer to Russia and an authoritarian adversary. Well, today's speech, however, Trump's first to Congress in his second term, gives him the opportunity to further justify the shakeups, both at home and abroad, to lawmakers and to the public, and preview what's coming next. The president's plan to use the address to tout what he views as his administration's initial successes, while also hosting guests at the White House, said benefited from Trump's term, according to a White House official. According to another senior member of the administration, the president is likely to focus his remarks on immigration, new tariffs, and the Department of Government Efficiency's efforts to slash budgets and fire federal workers, as well as the administration's efforts to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the federal government. The VOA's Anita Powell joins us now. She's in Washington. Anita, great to see you. Very peculiar times it is for Trump, and I guess for the rest of America, especially with this upcoming address to Congress, his first in his second term. Also very peculiar because it's coming after the announcement of the U.S. cutting aid to Russia.
Right. You are correct about this, but I just want to clarify that this address to a joint session of Congress is a statutory requirement of the American president. Only in modern history has this been televised. This is not a State of the Union address this time because it is considered a joint address to Congress because this is the beginning of Trump's term. The first few months of a presidency, that speech is not considered a State of the Union. But this is a regular requirement of the American president to speak to a joint session of Congress about his agenda, his priorities, and the key line that we're going to be hearing tonight that every U.S. president has said in his State of the Union address is the State of the Union is. Usually presidents say strong. We will see what Donald Trump says tonight.
Indeed, I know a lot of Americans will be watching this. But for the people in Congress, though, what will he be addressing, to lawmakers? What will he be saying to them? Because this is not just to lawmakers, this will also be to the American people somewhat, right?
Well, these lawmakers who are gathered in this chamber are going to have a pretty difficult assignment mid-March, where they have to pass a new budget. So he is going to be thinking, I think, in light of that, because he's talking to people who hold the power of the purse, and he's going to talk to them about his agenda fits with what he wants them to pass in March 14th when they pass a continuing resolution for the budget. As you mentioned, he is going to stress immigration. This is a key pillar of his campaign and his promises. And he is going to probably address, as he said in that Roosevelt Room statement, that he is going to address the next steps in Ukraine. I want to go back to that Roosevelt Room statement and just correct one thing that the president said, though. He said that the U.S. has given $350 billion in aid to Ukraine. Government watchdogs and publicly available data showing how much the U.S. Congress has appropriated for Ukraine puts the number far lower than that, about $183 billion. So I just want to clear that up because that is a misconception, and I am not sure where the president is getting his number, but in our searches for that $350 billion, we have come up $170 billion short, and I just want to remind your viewers of that number is in question.
But do the American people wonder, how Ukraine has utilized these funds? I mean, a lot of people seem to be backing the U.S. president with this minerals deal that he's supposed to be signing with the Ukrainian president, which was not signed on Friday, and which the president is very upset about. He says he wants those earth minerals to be able to fuel engines. He wanted to be able to, I guess, improve the economy. And he says this is because he recently found out that other aid donors were also getting some deal out of Ukraine.
I want to just mention that as well, because the president was corrected in person in the Oval Office by two European leaders who said that most of the European funding to Ukraine was a grant, not a loan. Going back to this deal, that might be a bit of an overstatement because this deal is not penned in ink. It wasn't, of course, signed after that engagement between Zelensky, President Trump, and Vice President Vance in the Oval Office. But this deal, even the Trump administration has said this deal is the first step. Those rare earth minerals that Trump is speaking about, and also the oil and gas, those are either tied up in conflict zones or have yet to be explored. So this is not a matter of months. This is not even a matter of years. This may be a matter of decades, and it's not clear what they're going to find. And it's also not clear, with the war still ongoing, what is going to be accessible to American exploration. So this is a very nascent, early deal. But this serves Trump's main argument for Ukraine, which is that he wants to demonstrate to the American people that they are getting something for their money. And in his view, this is the most tangible thing that he can give back to the American people as a promise. The promise of lucre in Ukraine, the promise of oil, gas, critical minerals as a possible repayment or compensation for continued support of Ukraine. But on this, he has been very, very clear. He sees this deal as critical to continuing U.S. support of Ukraine. And we saw him put extra pressure on Ukraine last night when the White House announced that they were suspending all military aid to Ukraine.
Is it unusual that he's asking for this at this time? Because as you rightly point out, Ukraine is currently in a state of war. And even if he does sign the deal, the American government or, the contractors or whatever will not be able to get access to the country until the fighting stops until those Russian drones stop hitting Ukraine and the country begins its redevelopment and rehabilitation and reconstruction and so on. So would that be a wise move at this time? What do Americans think?
Amarachi, you lay out some very interesting questions, and right now we have more questions than answers on the future of Ukraine and on the promise of this mineral deal. But there is, of course, support for this among the American public. There has been for the last year or so a rising tide of concern over what the American people are getting for their support of Ukraine. And there are Americans who feel that under President Biden, they weren't getting that reassurance. They weren't getting a return on their investment. So I think that this is something that Trump has entered into the discussion that a number of Americans do feel is a step. But of course, as you raised all of those questions about the fundamental uncertainty of this deal, never mind the fact that about 5% of Ukrainian territory is in Russian control, or I'm sorry, I am incorrect there. 1/5 of territory that holds these minerals is under Russian control. And let's just blur that even further and just say some of these areas where some of these minerals and goodies are under Russian control. So there's just so many more questions than answers right now. And as the president said yesterday, he's going to take a stab at addressing some of these questions in his speech tonight before a joint session of Congress.
Really interesting to watch the speech. I know one other issue that will be important to Americans is the issue of jobs. So many federal jobs on the line. So much confusion, though, surrounding job security. DOGE has requested people fill forms telling how exactly what they have done at work, saying that they have to report to their supervisors and so on. You also have the Ministry of the Ministry of Defense also saying, people had to respond, to those mails. I think there was even a cabinet meeting where Elon Musk had to ask questions about what problems people had, with the forms he was asking them to fill. Will the president be addressing this as well in Congress?
Well, as this is a key pillar of what he has done in the first 6 weeks of his second term, it is likely he's going to speak about his efforts to, in his terms, streamline the U.S. government. I want to be clear on what you just said at the beginning about the requests that are coming out of DOGE to federal workers. When you said they're required to account, what they're specifically required to do is 2 Mondays in a row now, federal workers had to send a 5-point bullet point list to an email somewhere in the federal government saying what they did last week. I just want to be clear, that is probably something that any employee anywhere could do on the fly. And that is the point that DOGE is making, that this is not an extraordinary request. You can think of 5 things that you've accomplished last week. But the pushback from federal workers, of course, and from unions, is that there already exist monitoring and evaluation regimes and systems inside every federal agency. And it raises questions like, what can you learn looking at the 5 accomplishments of a federal employee who is a firefighter, a thoracic surgeon, or a mail clerk? What are the commonalities there and what can you learn? And that's where, Elon Musk has said he's probably going to use AI to analyze these 5 points emails. But when you're looking at a system as large as the U.S. government, 2.4 million civilian employees, it's going to be very interesting to see what this Department of Government Efficiency, which is not an actual department, is going to advise and is going to glean from those 5 points that so many federal employees sent in at Monday night, the past 2 Monday nights.
Well, I guess right now we'll have to wait for President Trump's speech, which is coming up later tonight. It'll probably be much later for us since it will be evening for you in the United States. Anita, thanks again for joining us on the program.
My pleasure.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has described an era of rearmament as she outlines plans to boost defense spending by up to 800 billion euros, but also refuses to take questions from reporters in Brussels ahead of this week's European Council meeting. She said the 5-point Rearm Europe plan would include the activation of the National Escape Clause for more defense spending previously announced at the Munich Security Conference. The Stability and Growth Pact currently obliges European countries to keep deficit to 3% GDP and debt under 60% or face penalties, while the change would loosen restrictions. Von der Leyen also announced a new instrument to provide 150 billion euros on loans, using the EU budget to fund more defense investments and mobilizing private capital by accelerating the savings and investment union and, of course, through the European Investment Bank.
In the various meetings in the last few weeks, most recently 2 days ago in London, the answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament. And Europe is ready to massively boost its defense spending, both to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security. Now, there are 5 points to this plan. The first part of this Rearm Europe plan is to unleash the use of public funding in defense on the national level. Member states are ready to invest more in their own security if they have the fiscal space, so we must enable them to do so. And this is why we will propose to activate the National Escape Clause of the Stability and Growth Pact. This will allow member states to significantly increase their defense expenditures without triggering the excessive deficit procedure. The second proposal will be a new instrument. It will provide 150 billion euros of loans to member states for defense investment. This approach of joint procurement will also reduce costs. It will reduce fragmentation, but it will increase interoperability and, of course, strengthen our defense industrial base. The third point is using the power of the EU budget. And there's a lot we can do in this domain in the short term to direct more funds towards defense-related investments. And this is why I can announce that we will propose additional possibilities and incentives for member states, that they will decide if they want to use cohesion policy programs to increase defense spending. Now, the last 2 areas of action aim at mobilizing private capital by accelerating the savings and investment union and, of course, through the European Investment Bank.
Back to the topic of Ukraine now. Deputy of the French National Assembly, Marine Le Pen, has said at a meeting in Paris today there could be no military solution to the Russia-Ukraine conflict and ruled out NATO and EU memberships for Kyiv. According to her, there is no doubt that we must support Ukraine if it is to remain sovereign and free, but we need to do it realistically and with our own national interests in mind, rather than with empty rhetoric. Understanding realities means, first of all, admitting that we cannot promise Ukraine NATO membership when we know that this option was a justification for Russian aggression and is clearly rejected today by the United States. Similarly, Ukraine's accession to the European Union is unquestionably against our interests. The French National Rally leader called European leaders and allies to take action towards ending the conflict by hosting a peace conference that includes both Russia and Ukraine, but excludes NATO and the EU. She called on Washington's desire to end the conflict as a move guided by the defense of American interests, particularly economic ones. Now, Ukraine's ability to protect its people and citizens relied heavily on sophisticated U.S. air defense systems such as Patriot batteries, NASAMS, all jointly developed by Norway. The U.S. has given Ukraine the ability to carry out long-range missiles with HIMARS and ATACM missiles. So the U.S. has limited their use inside Russia, but they still have been vital to hit high-value targets inside occupied territories. It is not just quality, but quantity. The world's most powerful military has been able to send hundreds of surplus Humvees and armored vehicles, numbers the smaller European armies could never match. The absence of some of this aid may take some time to filter down to the front line in Ukraine, but there could be a more worrying immediate impact, not least in terms of intelligence sharing. No nation can match the U.S. in terms of space-based surveillance, intelligence gathering, and communications. It is not just provided by the U.S. military, but commercial companies too. Let's discuss the impacts of the U.S. withdrawing aid from Ukraine. I want to bring in now political and international affairs analyst Professor Femi Otubanjo, who joins us from here in Lagos. Professor, thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, and I know that you have been monitoring, developments. We've seen the trajectory from Friday. I know some U.S. media say that we didn't get to see everything that transpired in the Oval Office. It was a 50-minute video. They said everything was going well until the Ukrainian President Zelensky said that Russia cannot be trusted, and I think that is where the U.S. President took offense at what he said. Now, Trump has announced he's cutting aid to Ukraine. This is what was feared, the fact that the U.S. could withdraw aid from Ukraine. Following that conversation, could this be the beginning of harder times for Ukraine?
Yes. Well, the altercation in the Oval Office was an unusual diplomatic development. Of course, the American president had indicated severally some level of negative attitude towards Ukraine. They had said many things, and so the air was already fouled up in terms of the relationship between Zelensky and Trump. Trump had in fact called him a dictator, although he denied doing it. But the reality, of course, is that at the point at which Zelensky said you cannot trust Putin, he was virtually saying that the option was not peace, but continuing to fight. That did not go down with Trump. Trump had promised in his campaign, he even said he was going to end the war within 24 hours. And here was a man who was saying that you cannot really end this war by trusting Putin, and that he probably will end up even expanding his ambition to your own country. That riled the President Trump. The reality, of course, is that here is Trump struggling to create the opportunity for peace. You remember the officials of Russia and the U.S. have met in Saudi Arabia to work out some framework of peace. But of course, Ukraine was not taken along, and Ukraine feels that it might be betrayed without being a party to the negotiation. The reality, of course, that we must see in broad theoretical perspectives is that the U.S. under Trump seems to be wanting to withdraw from the historic orientation of the U.S. In the last 30 years or so, since George Bush the Senior, the Americans have pursued a policy of preventing any other country from rising to challenge its hegemony. That was the George Bush doctrine, George Bush Senior, what is called the Wolf's doctrine, that America must not allow any other country to emerge to challenge its hegemony in the global system. It is interesting that it is Trump that wants to change that. Trump recognizes the reality of multipolarity and that you cannot use war to weaken the other side. And that was the doctrine then, weaken Russia by proxy war. And Trump just thinks that it is senseless. Ukraine can never win, and then you are having this destruction and deaths all over the place. So there's a major change in American foreign policy orientation that Trump is introducing, and is not being recognized yet. Although he has his own personal relationship with Putin, which in fact empowers him, enhances his commitment to peace. He's saying to Zelensky, you are not going to win this war. 2,500 people are dying every week, or even every day, and the only path open to you is peace. This has been said before. People like Professor Neil Sherman, a major international affairs analyst, has said that the West was leading Ukraine on a primrose road, the road that appears to be leading to be wide and beautiful, but leads to destruction. And that's what has happened. But Zelensky does not want the war to end. He thinks that there's still a pathway to victory. There's no pathway to victory. In spite of the encouragement of European powers, European powers are confused. The European powers were fighting an American agenda, but America is abandoning that agenda, and they don't even know what to do. And I'm afraid that Trump may have the better argument at this time. Let's stop the war. The United States is not interested in preventing another power or a multipolar system. The world is now multipolar, not unipolar. And therefore, whatever we do must reflect that reality.
That's a pretty interesting perspective at looking at this, and I think one that is not popular either. So you don't think that Europe can fill this vacuum that America has created by pulling out of, pulling support for Ukraine at this time?
You know, if you know the history of the Western Alliance, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, it's been since 1949, a union of states under the umbrella of the United States of America. It is the American that provides the military power. As we speak, you know, God knows how many thousands of troops are in Germany and all over the place. America gives cover to all these countries. Those countries, unfortunately, were even fighting America's war to weaken Russia. But now America has left, and they are befuddled. They don't even know what to do. What is Europe with America? Europe cannot say we want to go it alone without the US. You cannot antagonize the US. You cannot go it alone. And there's no sense in what they are suggesting now, continue to support Zelensky to fight a war that would never be won by Ukraine. And so, particularly if the US is not part of it. So the US has withdrawn, virtually withdrawn. That's what you have seen with the withdrawal of aid. That's withdrawn from supporting Ukraine. The support Ukraine got under Biden was a continuation of that Cold War perspective in America, of America remaining the only superpower hegemony in the world. That has changed. Trump is recognizing that there are other countries like China and Russia that are equally superpowers. And in a multipolar world, you cannot insist that you have to weaken one country in order to retain your own hegemony. Now, this, I understand that Zelensky is right in being adamant about fighting for his own country. But the reality is that whatever he wants cannot be won by war. It has to be by negotiation. And I think here, Trump has the better argument, in spite of the fact that many people don't like Trump.
Yeah, but that negotiation was what I believe that Zelensky was trying to have at the start of this, before the Russians invaded. But I'm just wondering, withdrawal of support from Ukraine, that would not mean a support for Russia, would it?
Well, I don't know what is... what it means is that America under Trump wants to have a different kind of relationship with Russia that is not hostile, that is not targeted at destroying Russia and preventing Russia from rising. Just like America also has the same kind under people like Biden, those old warrior politicians who lived through the Cold War. They also have that same towards China, prevent China from rising. prevent Russia from rising. But then, really, you cannot prevent. It's like preventing the sun from coming out. Countries are going to rise as a result of developments in their technology, in their resources, in their whatever, those things, those elements of power that transform a country from being a small power to a great power. Those countries have it. They are both nuclear powers. And so you cannot stop them by just supporting proxy wars. The critical point is that Russia does not want NATO not want Ukraine to be in NATO. And of course, Ukraine wants its land back. That is where the discussion should be focusing. It is not fighting a war. It is about a peace that will give some comfort to both sides. That will prevent, and that's becoming popular. That's the view of the United States. And as you saw, Le Pen in France has articulated it very clearly. No NATO for Ukraine, but return some land that were taken during the war. You can negotiate over those that were taken before the war. But the reality is that if you have an unwinnable war that is leading to the destruction of your country, your first instinct is to want to fight. Is to want to have peace. And that's what Trump is insisting. America cannot continue to support you to destroy your own country.
Do you?
The false illusion that you can win a war. And what Europe is doing and scrambling is just propaganda. It's not going to get anywhere. They can't get him unless the U.S. supports him. There's nothing that can be done.
Do you think that Russia's position could change if President Vladimir Putin was no longer Russia's president?
That's a large aspiration, and we should not pursue that. What is important is to deal with what we have on ground. Fortunately, you have an American president that appears to be friendly or to have a favorable disposition towards Putin. So let's have some peace. Let's have peace in Ukraine. Peace based on exchange. No NATO, no Ukraine land, return Ukraine land. That is the only option. That when we talk, some of these things are so obvious that we continue to go around and killing. As we are talking now, thousands are dying. In the meaningless expectation that a war can be won and Ukraine will then become a member of NATO. It's not going to be possible. As long as Russia is a nuclear power, it has not used it, or it has not even used 1/10 of its capability. So a nuclear power is not to be toyed with, and it will never lose a war. To lose a war, a nuclear power means that the world is finished, because once you unleash nuclear weapons into the atmosphere, everybody goes, including those of us who are remotely away from those theaters of war. The reality is that the United States is changing its orientation. Unfortunately, Trump is the president now, and it is the president that determines the course of foreign policy. And he is saying, we cannot continue to waste our resources on a meaningless war. We need to develop a different relationship with Russia. We need to recognize the reality of multipolarism. The world is not an American world. The world belongs to many, many centers of power. And as a result, we must not try to recreate the will by engineering what we cannot do. That is, create a world in which only American voice will be heard. It's interesting that Trump, a MAGA man who believes in American force, is the one that is preaching that foreign policy philosophy, and it is a philosophy that will bring peace to the world.
Still so many questions, but the reason Ukraine is in this position without nuclear weapons is because of that Budapest deal that was signed with Russia and the United States, where Ukraine gave up most of its nuclear weapons, and that is why it really doesn't have much to negotiate with now. Professor Femi Otobanjo, I believe you may have to come back. Still a lot more to unpack with the Ukraine situation. Thank you for joining us on The World Today.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You too. Well, still in the United States, President Donald Trump's new 25% tariffs on imports from Mexico and Canada have taken effect, along with a doubling of duties on Chinese goods to 20%, launching new trade conflicts with the top 3 U.S. trading partners. The tariff actions, which could upend nearly $2.2 trillion in two-way annual U.S. trade, went live at midnight of today, hours after Trump declared that all 3 countries had failed to do enough to stem the flow of the deadly opioid fentanyl and its precursor chemicals into the U.S. China responded immediately after the deadline, announcing additional tariffs of 10% and 15% on certain U.S. imports from March 10, and a series of new export restrictions for designated U.S. entities. Well, goods entering the U.S. from Canada and Mexico will now be slapped with a 25% charge. Canada has announced tariffs on its own in response. Mexico has also said it will retaliate. To the measures, the 3 trade partners have deeply integrated economies and supply chains with an estimated $2 billion worth of manufactured goods crossing the borders daily. Trump says he wants to protect American industries, but many economists warn that such tariffs could lead to prices rising for consumers in the U.S. That's because the tax is paid by the domestic company importing the goods, who may choose to pass the cost on to customers directly or to reduce imports, which would mean fewer products available. So what could get more expensive now in the U.S.? You have cars, which will probably go up in price by about $3,000, according to economists. And that's because parts cross the U.S., Canada and Mexico borders multiple times before a vehicle is assembled. Popular Mexican beers, Modelo and Corona, could also get more expensive for U.S. customers if the American companies importing them pass on the increased import taxes. It's also possible that rather than passing on the cost increase, firms could just import less. The U.S. imports about 1/3 of its softwood lumber from Canada each year, and that key builder material would be hit by Trump's suggested tariffs. Trump says the U.S. has more lumber than they could ever use. The National Association of Home Builders has urged the president to exempt building materials from the proposed tariffs because of their harmful effect on housing affordability. There will be impacts on such small things like maple syrup, on fuel prices even, and avocados. Scientists are saying more than half of adults and 1/3 of children, teenagers and young adults around the world are predicted to be overweight or obese by 2050. The findings come in a new study of global data published in the Lancet journal covering more than 200 countries. Researchers warn that obesity levels are predicted to accelerate rapidly during the remainder of this decade, particularly in lower income countries. However, experts say that if governments take urgent action now, there's still time to prevent what they describe as a profound tragedy. I want to bring in now public health physician and member of the executive of the Association of Public Health Physicians of Nigeria, Dr. Olasimbo Babalola. She joins us from here in Lagos, also virtually. Dr. Babalola, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Good evening, and I'm sure that research and results like this don't surprise you. You probably see more problems, more obese-related problems on a daily basis. So how would you define obesity? Does it have to do with size, or do we have to look at health indicators instead?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So generally, obesity is defined as accumulation of excessive fats in the body, and then this poses a person to different risk, like health risk. And we usually define it with the use of the body mass index, which is commonly known as a BMI. So when we have a BMI of 30 or more than 30, it is usually calculated using the person's weight and the person's height. So when there is BMI of 30 or more than 30, then we can classify the person as being obese. Also, obesity is not just about the size. It is also has to do more with the health indicators. These health indicators include the waist circumference. This is the excessive fats around the person's abdomen. So when there is excessive fat around the person's abdomen, studies have shown that this is linked to higher risk of cardiovascular disease. Another health indicator is the body composition, that is the weight versus the fat ratio. When there is more fat than muscle, then there can be obesity. Then another one is to talk about the metabolic health markers like the diabetes, high blood sugar, which is diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure. This also can indicate obesity. So obesity is not just about the size, it is about the body fat that affects the body. And some people might have weights that are higher, but they will have a healthy metabolic composition. While some might have normal weights, they look like they have a normal size, but they are actually obese when we calculate the BMI. Thank you very much.
Wow, that's interesting, because lots of slim people out there think that they're okay, that they have no problems. The problems is with those who have, who are heavier, and they think that those are the ones who should be heading to the gym. Speaking of which, there's been a culture, increased participation in the culture of going to gyms here in Nigeria. So you would really, think that we'd be excluded, from this study, but it does predict all over the world more people will be obese. Why do you think that is? Is it lifestyle, as a result of lifestyle changes that have probably not been made, or is it the diet?
Okay, so talking about the gym and exercise that most people are trying to incorporate into their lifestyle now, it is actually personalized. It should be personalized, and it should be a sustainable one. You shouldn't just jump into an exercise because you feel this is going to help me. You should have a personalized plan, and this is where we have a collaboration with the dietitian and nutritionist, and also the fitness experts. So when you have a best plan that depends on the person's lifestyle, a diet or exercise routine that fits into their daily schedule, usually we advocate for exercise that they enjoy, so it will be like punishment whenever they have to go to gym or they have to do exercise. Also, they have to have diets according to their conditions. There are different diets for different conditions. There are different, we have diets for hypertension where we have the DOGE diet. Also for diabetes, they have their diet. So this is where nutritionists will come in and help them to have a good, proper meal plan. Also, the activity level. You shouldn't just go ahead to have heavy exercise because you feel you want to maintain good health. You should have at least, the recommended one should be 30 minutes per day, 30 minutes of exercise per day for some number of days in the week, and then you have total of 150 minutes per week. So one important thing with this gym and exercise is the consistency. We should have more consistency over intensity.
Right.
So instead of doing an diet or excessive workout, it's better to have a balanced approach. With gradual changes, it will help you gradually to have a best result. And also, like I said earlier, work with nutritionist or dietitian, and also work with your fitness professional. Thank you.
So finally, doctor's orders on diets, generally what we should be eating now, especially for those of us who are getting older. What should we be fixing into our daily diets so that, we just maintain the proper metabolism. It will help kick up our metabolism as well and help us to live much healthier.
Okay, so the proper diet should be balanced diets, a diet with a lot of nutrition, that's nutrition dense diets. It has more quality and a balanced diet. So we go for whole food, whole grains instead of processed food or processed grains. Also, you go for
You might want to explain what
food.
that is, the whole foods and the homegrown, home grains,
so when I
and
say
so on.
Whole grain, I mean like wheat.
Yeah.
You go for natural grains, not the processed one. That's what I mean by whole grains.
Okay.
So you go for lean proteins, and then we prefer you go for fish rather than red meats, and also healthy fats like olive oil, avocado. Then we can get healthy fat from nuts too. Also, like I said earlier, you go for fiber-rich food. This will help with your digestion and also help with having satisfaction early. Then it will also help with blood sugar control, like beans, like oats, nuts, and other seeds. So also you monitor your protein intake. You shouldn't take more than 2 eggs in a week. Also, you take more fish. You prefer you boil than fry your fish, fry your meat, or fry your meals. Better you boil them. Also, the most important thing that most people don't even realize that is important in keeping healthy is hydration. You drink enough water instead of going for carbonated drinks and beverages. So water is the best thing for you to take. Also, very important, you reduce processed food, reduce canned food, and refined carbs, reduce sugary drinks and fast food. I know that is very easy for us. It's easy to pick up fast food in all the available chicken republic. Yeah, I'm not saying against that, but reduce it. Charlie. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Babalola, for the free consult on air today. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Well, here's something to put you in a good mood. The tens of thousands of cherry blossoms blooming on a hilltop in Yongfu, Fujian province in eastern China, creating this stunning pink panorama and beckoning visitors, all of us at least, to enjoy the view. At the Yongfu Cherry Blossom Tea Garden, tourists can enjoy the view, strolling through the tea garden and enjoying the landscape created by pink cherry blossoms, gently embracing the lush green tea mountains. The Yongfu Cherry Blossom Tea Garden, which boasts 10,000 cherry blossom trees, has long been a popular tourist destination. The garden grows 42 species of cherry blossoms, which bloom from January to March each year, attracting tourists eager to witness the wonderful moments. And pink also is a calming color, so drink it all in, people. Giving you the peace you need this evening. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.